Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is the Centurion Edition 100. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's May 30th, 2014.
Okay, the first story is Anglican Unscripted. This is our 100th episode, and congratulations, George. Good for you. Hard work, yeah. I've never done anything 100 times. It's kind of neat. I thought one time I'd get 100 parking tickets, but this is incredible. So how does this happen? How do two people get in front of their webcams once a week or once every 2 weeks and talk about Anglican news? Well, first of all, there's a history to the show, and George and I developed our friendship early on when we were covering the primates in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where we were cordoned off and sequestered with 40 or 50 other reporters from around the world who were not allowed to talk to the primates, who were there meeting and discussing whether or not to hold the Episcopal Church accountable, and you know how that all worked out. It was at that point that George and I, well, yeah, you're kind of a cool dude, and you're kind of a cool dude. Let's be friends. And we started this friendship that's lasted now, 7 or 8 years. And what you see as part of our success is us showing our friendship on the camera. We laugh at each other's jokes. We can bounce off each other. And there's a lot of humor in how we talk to each other about the news. A lot of our success is also due to you, the viewer. Sure, we're fun to watch, but we get a lot of support by you sitting in front of your webcams every week, your computers, and watching us. We would be nothing and nobodies and just two schmucks, one with a collar and one with suspenders, if it wasn't for the audience. But who really made Anglican TV or Anglican Unscripted famous, George?
Well, it's a toss-up between Chuck Murphy and Catherine Jeffers Shorey. Mm-hmm. Both were the gifts that kept on giving for the Anglican TV.
They were. About episode 15, when we were just, getting into this, we probably had 300 viewers, and things were, starting to click along, and people finally found out we were not talking just news. We were giving news and analysis. So we're getting in a lot less trouble. We started hearing rumors out of South Carolina about problems happening in the EMEA. We reported on it, and Chuck Murphy and his press office decided to put out a press release stating in no uncertain terms that I'm, it's not, this is verbatim, shall you ever listen to, watch, or pay any attention to two guys named Kevin Carlson or George Conger on Anglican Unscripted, which you can find at Anglican.tv. Never, ever go there. And what happens when you tell people no, George?
Well, Kevin, you have teenage daughters. I have teenage daughters. When you tell someone, don't hang out with that bad guy, he's bad news for you, what do? They immediately run and try to find out what's so bad about it.
So because EMEA was bad about putting out their own information, we got to put out information on their behalf, and many hundreds of EMEA priests were getting, and laity were getting their information from Anglican Unscripted, which turned out to be true, accurate, and fair reporting, and that made us famous.
See, Kevin, that I really think is the key thing that you just said there. You can have an argument with somebody and have a he said, she said, where Chuck Murphy says, you can't believe these guys that are all full of it. And if we respond, no, we're right, you're wrong, who are you going to believe? Mm-hmm. But you and I did the basic hard work of reporting, talking to dozens of AMIA priests in the United States, talking to archbishops in Rwanda and bishops in Rwanda, talking to people across the spectrum and getting the full story. So that from the very beginning, we were absolutely 100% sure of our facts and could back up every claim that we made. And the response from the AMIA was abuse, which was wonderful because it kept growing our audience. I mean, in other words, we would make another report based on another allegation. And sometimes we didn't name our sources, but some of them were, the primate of the Church of Rwanda is telling us this. And Chuck Murphy's, oh, that's an absolute lie. The primate can verify this is untrue. Well, we didn't burn our sources. We just stood with our sources. And history and time proved us to be 100% right.
Now, two things happened there. We were right. We were attacked, but we responded by trying not to be the news, but trying to give you the news. And that's an important part. Another part of our success is the same success that the ACNA happens to have right now, is Catherine Jefferts Schori, a common enemy, a heretic in the church, has been this somebody who we can report on week to week. If we had another Frank Griswold or a Browning, this would probably be about a lot less interesting show. We got to report over the last 2 years about 700 people being defrocked as clergy in the Episcopal Church because of being faithful to the traditional marriage and the teachings of the church. Thank you, Catherine. We appreciate your help in making us a viable news source.
See, and there is a huge element of personality in all this. Mm-hmm. If under Frank Griswold essentially believes the same things as Catherine Jefferts Schori, but it's how you go about doing something. Frank Griswold went to the 2003 primates meeting in London, and he signed a statement saying you should not ordain Gene Robinson. Well, he went and ordained Gene Robinson, a bishop of the Episcopal Church. It didn't personalize things, though. Mm-hmm. For some reason, Frank Griswold was able to sort of be wishy-washy and a little weaselly, and the primates didn't really nail him. Well, Catherine Jefferts Schori, when she was in Dar es Salaam, she signed a statement supporting discipline of the Episcopal Church, but then, as soon as she got out of that room, she immediately repudiated it. And for some reason, her actions caused people like Drexel Gomez, the then Archbishop of the West Indies, and Greg Venables and Henry Arambi, to come and to seek us out. Peter Akinola, to seek you and me out and say, that woman is a liar. And they were so incensed. And we report these things, and we were just lambasted as being misogynists and just being cranks. And what we reported was all true because we had sourced it, and we had found, we even had confirmation from the insiders at the ACC in Lambeth Palace.
That's true. Yeah.
Now, they wouldn't want to go on the record because that would just ruin their relations. But when we're wrong, Kevin, we're the first to bring up the fact that we're wrong and make a correction.
Yeah,
we don't say things just out of gossip.
No, and we're not famous for our corrections. We've had to make so few. So far. There's hopefully another 100 episodes under our belt. Let's talk about the history of technology with Anglican Unscripted. Right now, George and I are able to record this show live. He's in Vero Beach, Florida. I'm in Thomaston, Connecticut. And through his broadband feed and through my broadband feed, I'm recording on my iMac two people side by side on a screen. That wasn't always the case. That's only something we've been able to do for about maybe 5 or 6 months. Before this time, George would take his little webcam and he would record in SD format his video, and we would have to do this in sync. I would record on my little Kodak Z18 and he would record, and I would say 3, 2, 1, press record, and we would do our whole show in long format. And he would upload via FTP his video, and I would spend about 3 hours trying to sync them back and forth so that George and I wouldn't step on each other's lines and we sounded like we knew what we're talking about. It was about an 8-hour day to put the whole show together, 2 hours to film and 6 hours to edit. Oh, and about an hour and a half to receive the video.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just to upload these huge files. Now, being in Florida, it's a little bit slower technological pace down here. I have had terrible problems over the years with Comcast, my internet provider, and I've been rewired 2 or 3 times. And but just we would have, I'd try to upload, and about halfway through the thing would die, and I'd have to start all over again. Mm-hmm. We just have suffered through our technology was more advanced than our vendors were able to accommodate, or at least on my end.
On your end, yeah. I haven't had a whole lot of trouble, but many shows you'll see George and I, just starting off, and boom, his screen will go dead because the internet there goes off all the time, George. And it's what it is. Recording from a third world state like Florida and a first world state like Connecticut, based on taxes, of course. Now, let's talk about behind the scenes. How does this show get recorded? Well, George and I, throughout the week, send each other stories about what's going on. We post some of these stories to Anglican Inc. and other places about what's happening in the news, and we have to figure out what does the audience want to hear and not want to hear about, and what can we tell them that they don't know about. A lot of people use us as their single source for news. Wow, you're crazy, but thank you for doing that, because it's a nice visual audio format that's easy to follow, and today's generation has lost the ability to spend time reading full articles. And we now read in 144 characters. We won't read magazine-length articles like my parents used to do. My dad would read 2 whole papers a day, the morning edition of the Wisconsin State Journal and the evening edition of the Capital Times in Madison, Wisconsin. And people don't have that time anymore, George.
No, and I've experienced that in writing for the Church of England newspaper, which is the oldest church newspaper in the world. It's older than any Catholic publication. It's been around since 1828. King George IV was the king at that time. The Duke of Wellington was the prime minister. In writing for the Church of England newspaper, I have started out writing in a typical British journalistic fashion, and I'd knock out 7 or 8 400 to 500 word stories a week. In the last 4 or 5 years, they've not been able to make the switch to the internet successfully. They still put out a newspaper, but they're now down to 16 pages. Whereas when I started with them, they were with the 32 to 40 pages. And I've had to learn to knock out stories that were 500 to 600 words down to 200 words to fit into a smaller space, and also because readers just weren't going past the second or third paragraph. And I've had to retrain myself, and we're seeing that across the board in all print media.
It's true. Now, what's the future of Anglican Unscripted? Well, George and I have toyed with lots of different ideas. We like what we're doing now, but we can't be consistent in our schedule based on technology. George and I have lives outside of Anglican news. He's a priest. I run a business. I travel a lot. He's got twin daughters. I can't tell you how much time that takes. There's just parts of our lives that make taping Anglican Unscripted a little less predictable than we would like. So I think the future, we would like to at least do this on a weekly basis unscripted, but we'd like to develop something else, a Christian Unscripted, or something where we just talk about Christian issues, hopefully on a daily basis in maybe 5 or 10 minute segments. We don't know the future, but there's something out there we're thinking about.
No, for instance, we have a very large non-Episcopal, non-Anglican audience. And we have people write to us say, you really need to talk about the coming split in the Methodist Church. Well, that's something we really do need to talk about. But how do we fit that into a weekly, every other week show where we've got 3 or 4 episodes, and Catherine Jefferts Schori's always going to keep us hopping. Justin Welby's always going to say something goofy. So that basically leaves 2 slots open. And if we have a Methodist slot and a Catholic slot, that closes out other things. So we need to find a way not to change Anglican Unscripted, but maybe to spin off something else that allows us to develop that market niche appropriately.
So, for the future of Anglican Unscripted, we need your prayers. We thank you for being a faithful audience, for donating when we need to travel. And, oh, by the way, speaking of that, we do need donations to travel to the Thy Kingdom Come conference. I think it's going to be held in June. We got about $600 in donations. We need another $400. Yes, George?
Kevin, I do want to add something. Kevin spiked this in an earlier part of our conversation, but I need to get this in. Folks, you need to understand it takes money to make this happen.
Yes.
Money for equipment, you can understand that. Money for travel. Money for bribes. In Tanzania, Kevin and I were the only journalists who got inside the VIP lounge at the Dar es Salaam airport when the Archbishop of Canterbury arrived. The president of Tanzania was going to greet the Archbishop, and some other archbishops were on the flight as well, and there was a VIP lounge. And the army and the police were surrounding the airport with submachine guns, and the local press was being kept at arm's length. But there's these two white guys with pink, sunburnt noses with cameras and tape recorders moving around, mooching around the president of Tanzania. How did that happen?
I don't know.
How did that happen?
A shilling or two. But George introduced me to a lot of what we call behind-the-scenes journalistic techniques. Number one, bribery. He got us through security. We walked around the metal detectors for $10 American to get videotape of the VIP lounge. He taught me lots of secrets of how to get documentation after an event occurs. George,
it's called dumpster diving.
Dumpster diving. George has 15, 20 years of hardened journalist experience. I just carry a camera and push the record button, and you guys seem to like that. Together, it works. So keep us in your prayers, and we hope to be talking about episode 200 pretty soon.
So send us money to get to the ACNA conference. Mm-hmm. Send us money for equipment. Send us money to pay off corrupt policemen in African nations.
George, let's move on to our second story, and we're going to talk about the social media politics that we did before. I would like to bring you great news. I would like to record right now that the Boko Haram had released the 300 schoolgirls that were taken almost a month and a half ago because the Bring Back Our Girls hashtag on Twitter worked. It didn't. And as George and I talked about in episode 99, hashtag politics, I will like you on Facebook, democracy doesn't work. And we're to the point now where we have to find a solution.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was an exercise in narcissism. Mm-hmm. To take a selfie, a picture of yourself holding a sign with the hashtag saying, "Bring back our girls," it's a low-risk way of basically proclaiming your virtue and your morality. And I don't think it really did much of anything to convince Boko Haram or the governments in the region to do anything.
No, I'm sure the leader of Boko Haram...
Is that even trending right now on Twitter?
No, it's not. It's yes, all women is the new trend because of another violent act. And we need to step back here and look at the Boko Haram as a whole. We have to ask ourselves, how did a small group, no bigger than the Unabomber some 12 years ago, become an all-powerful terrorist organization in Nigeria? How did people who all they didn't like was people getting a Western education become the most violent organization in many, many years in Nigeria? And a lot of it has to do with money.
Western intelligence agencies, security analysts, and the Nigerian government have made public statements saying that Boko Haram has been financed by Iran. It was financed by Muammar Gaddafi for a number of years. It's financed by elements in the Nigerian military that want to provoke a military coup. Mm-hmm. So the Army Officer Corps is predominantly Muslim, and they've been able to enrich themselves when they were in power. Now, civilian rule has moved all the wealth back to civilian hands in the predominantly Christian South, where all the oil is. Mm-hmm. And the Army has, as some Anglican bishops have told us, the Army is seeking an excuse to seize power again. And so Boko Haram has trucks, they have weapons, they have uniforms, they have ammunition, and they can move across the border into Chad and to Mali, and the Nigerian army can't get them. So imagine if Charles Manson and his crazy group of people, which is how big Boko Haram was at one point, all of a sudden had some foreign government giving them arms and trucks and missiles and allowing them a safe haven whenever the police wanted to go after them. Of course they would grow, and of course they can attract disaffected young Muslims in the north with weapons and power. And until you shut down that pipeline, they're going to be keeping on.
A lot of people say, well, we need to negotiate with them. We need to meet them on their terms. We need to pay them off to get our schoolgirls back. Archbishop Boko, the Archbishop of Nigeria, all of Nigeria, put out a letter saying, no, we can't negotiate with them. We can't meet them on their terms. There is no way to negotiate with these type of people. Justin Welby said the same about 2 weeks ago, that they're a bunch of loonies. There's no way to negotiate with the Boko Haram. And there's truth to that, because let's look back at the, I guess 4 or 5 years ago was the biggest part of the Somali pirate raids, where Somali people would hop on little small boats. They would board oil cargo ships heading through the Somali waters and hijack them and demand a ransom. The default position of the insurance companies for all these oil tankers was to pay the ransom. So if 15 of your employees were held ransom and 300 tons of oil were held ransom, you would gladly pay $1 million. And it didn't take too long for Somali warlords to figure out there's no opposition here. We take a boat that's going through our waters, we board it, we get on the satellite phone, we call and demand a ransom, and they pay it. That is profit all the way around. Nobody gets hurt, nobody gets shot, and Somali warlords were worth $40 and $50 million within a year of this type of activity. And that's working on their terms. How do we work this on our terms? And when they have hostages, it's a very difficult position, because nobody wants to hear about 300 girls being raped, shot, murdered in Nigeria. The ball is in Boko Haram's court, but we can't play their game.
Well, what happened in Somalia was the U.S. Navy began to do onshore raids to prevent the motherships from coming out, as well as other navies. And when we would capture pirates, we would bring the trial in the U.S. and start this whole legal process. The Russian Navy got involved as well, as did the Chinese Navy. And you know what they would do, Kevin?
They would empty their machine guns.
They would empty their machine guns into the boats and then sail away. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon, no Russian or Chinese flagged vessels were being attacked. Mm-hmm. It was all focused on Western flagged vessels. Mm-hmm. And now that the military has stepped in, it's done.
Well, it's got to be interesting from the Boko Haram's point of view as well. Every week they're bombing places. They're bombing bus stations. They're bombing churches. They're burning down things. They're killing people. They're hijacking cars. And they're like, wait, taking 300 girls is what finally got your attention? Last week they killed 140 people in a marketplace. I guarantee by the time you watch this episode, there'll be another attack. And there's no negotiation with these people. And now it's affecting the life of your normal Nigerian. People are starting not to go to church in Jos and other places in the country, George.
Yes, in Jos, in the Plateau State, there was the bombings, 2 bombings now, killed over 140 people in a central marketplace. And there were reports this past Sunday people stayed away from churches because Boko Haram has created fear in people's hearts that if they go to church, a church will be attacked and destroyed or machine gunned, because that's been happening. Kevin and I, we get these news feeds from Nigeria. We get email information. I believe it's the Diocese of Damansura in northeastern Nigeria that has shut down. Mm-hmm. The bishop has had to move to Jos. His clergy have had to move out of the country because their congregations, their lives are being threatened, their people are being killed, and their safety cannot be guaranteed by the Nigerian police or military. So Boko Haram is winning. Now,
how are they winning? Well, the country of Nigeria is broken. The government is broken. The oil industry is broken. Especially the army is broken. All these things has to be rebooted and fixed. It's not much that George and I can do to give good suggestions for this. It's either all going to collapse into some type of tyranny and maybe an army coup. Maybe the Muslims will put more effort into it and it'll become an Islamic state. But what Nigeria needs now is your prayer and support.
Well, Kevin, I'm afraid it's even going to get worse than that. Archbishop Chukwuma, who's the Archbishop of, I believe, the Bendel province in southeastern Nigeria. Some of our viewers may remember the Biafra War, 1968, southeastern Nigeria, where the oil is, seceded. And there was a civil war that cost millions of lives, and finally the national government won. Archbishop Chukwuma, who's the Archbishop of that region, is talking about secession once again. You know, if we can't control Boko Haram in the north, fine. Let's close our borders and break apart Nigeria into different countries, a Christian south and a Muslim north. That, unfortunately, unless the army does something, I believe is going to be the most likely outcome. No civil war.
So keep our brothers and sisters missionaries and clergy, priests, and laity in your prayers. Pray for the Church of Nigeria. Pray for the government. And pray that God would have mercy on the situation there. Via that little icon on my iPad called Skype, I have the magical A.S. Haley, and we're going to talk about a little bit of news. It's not been a good week for those people who fighting law cases in California, especially church law cases. Bring us quickly up to date on what's been happening in San Joaquin.
Well, the judge had issued a tentative ruling, which was basically a cut and paste of the version that the plaintiff said supplied him with a proposed ruling. And so we have now challenged it. We requested a full statement of decision, and we requested that he address 12 issues we identified that he had not sufficiently addressed in the version of the opinion that he wrote. And what this does is this puts him on notice that these are the issues that we're going to be contesting on appeal. And so he might as well address them now to give the reviewing court a chance to see why he decided as he did. If he doesn't address them, and he's free to do that if he wants, just to overrule our objections and keep the same decision. Nothing can compel him to do it, but the thing that should compel him is the fact that, as I say, the reviewing court would be looking over his shoulder. And if he doesn't address these issues, then they'll wonder, well, what is the story here? Why can't you say something about this? Maybe you got it wrong. So we'll see.
Well, it's interesting because people are like, Alan, why can't he see the case for what it is? You know, neutral principles and all the things that are in the Constitution. You know, the Supreme Court has made decisions on this in the past. Why does this lowly judge from Fresno not get it? And we see a lot of this where at some point into the testimony, the judge has made up a decision already. And you mentioned he's going to cut and paste the testimony of the Episcopal Church as his decision. Now, we need to be honest here. There's no examination process or quiz that a lawyer has to take to be a judge. Sometimes you're elected judges, sometimes you're appointed judge. I don't know how it works in California, but it's not just the smartest person in the room is made judge.
No, that's right. All you have to do is have practiced law for 10 years.
Okay, well, there you go. Now, I've been part of court cases here in Connecticut where you were like watching testimony, and you're like, there's no way the judge is going to buy this. But after a while, he starts to pick up on what the real truth was. And I was part of a court case here in Connecticut where I thought for sure the judge was going to rule on the prosecutor's side, but in the end, he came out on the side of defense because he understood the underlying issues. He took his time to really look into it, and some judges just don't want to take that time.
No, in fact, I was thinking back to my case that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court from Hawaii about the liquor tax law out there. And when I first tried the case in front of the tax judge in Hawaii, the first thing I knew he had decided the case was when an opinion appeared in my mail written by the Attorney General. Apparently, the judge had simply called up to the Attorney General and said, you go ahead and write the decision. I'm ruling in the state's favor. And some judges are like that. They just say, you do the work, and I'll let you know which side I'm ruling for, but I don't have to do any thinking because I'm just going to say this, and then you back it up for me.
Well, we have the best legal system on the face of the earth. This is Memorial Day weekend. Men and women for 200 or more years have been fighting for the Constitution, defending
Yes.
our lives and our freedom for it. We thank them for it. But justice is blind. They don't always get it the way we expect them to get it. We always
Right.
expect fairness, equality, jurisprudence. It doesn't always happen that way, Alan.
No, and it's true. And again, another judge early on in my career taught me something about that. He was a trial judge in Honolulu in federal court. And I said, please don't rule that way, Judge. I'm going to have to take an appeal. And then he said, counsel, I just get paid to make decisions. The Ninth Circuit gets paid to make them right. And so some judges may have that attitude.
That's good. I like that.
So we'll see. Maybe the Fifth District here is the one that's going to get paid to get the judgment right. Oh boy! But it's been a long haul. This case has been around in the courts since 2009. Mm-hmm. We're going to 2014. 5 years. We're going to go up on appeal. Hopefully this time the Court of Appeals will be very clear and say, no, Judge Black, we didn't mean that for you to do it that way. So back again we would go, and who knows? This could be 7, 8, 9 years in the mill.
Let's give people hope. Let's talk about Fort Worth. What's been happening down there?
Fort Worth is on a very good track. The judge there has sidestepped all of Episcopal Church's attempts to delay and hinder the coming trial. He set a trial date for early next year, but there's also set a date for dispositive motions, like a motion for summary judgment. And I'm pretty sure that's what Bishop Eicher and his attorneys are going to do, is file a motion for summary judgment based on the ruling already that they got from the Texas Supreme Court. So that will be heard probably in November, December, and that could be it for Fort Worth until, again, another appeal. But given what happened on the earlier appeal, I would say that both in South Carolina and Texas at this point, the Episcopal Church's only chance long-term is going to be somehow try to get the attention of the U.S. Supreme Court. And maybe that's their strategy ultimately. Maybe they're going through the motions here to fight in these states where the law is already against them.
Yeah, but I don't think they could win in front of the Supreme Court.
Well, no, and as I say, that everybody's tried to get the U.S. Supreme Court to take these church property cases, starting with your own case in Connecticut, mm-hmm. and Georgia, and so on, and the Supreme Court has refused to touch them. It took a very, very close look, remember, at the one from Virginia. Yeah. But even there, after keeping it on the calendar for so long, they then couldn't get 4 votes to accept it. So it's very funny. I mean, as I pointed out many times, this is a Supreme Court with very strong religion, 6 Catholics on it and 3 Jews. So you think the 6 Catholics could muster 4 votes to set the church law right, but so far it hasn't happened.
No, it has not. This is episode 100 of Anglican Unscripted. You've been with us, I think, since episode 3, giving up law opinions on stuff that's going on. And it's interesting because we've had basically 100 episodes of law discussion. Now, I come here as a lay law person. I don't know all the words and acronyms, but I try to keep up with the stuff you're talking about. And if I can keep up with it, I know the audience can. And I think they've really benefited from your time here.
Well, I thank you very much for the opportunity. As I say, one of the things a lawyer should be able to do is explain what's going on to his clients in simple language. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have that skill, then you maybe want to have a different area of the law where you don't have to work with clients. But I've been fortunate all my life.
You could be a judge.
Right. That's what they'd make you. In any event, I've really enjoyed my association with you and George and Peter. And it's look forward to it each time. Pleasure, not always with the news that we have to discuss, but always with pleasure to be in your company and on your program.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, and a great asset to the program, because when you're not on, I get emails. Is he still right? What, did he quit? Is he alive? What's going on? Where's Alan? We need to know what's happening in South Carolina. So right. You've been a great asset to the program, and we'll have the same little talk in episode 200 some 2 years from now. Thank you so much, Alan.
Okay, very good.
Okay, we're going to move on to our third news story. I'm going to talk about another Anglican blog called Stand Firm, whose leader, Greg Griffith, has decided to join the Catholic Church. Now, let me tell you about Greg. I met Greg first in 2006 at General Convention. Greg is a motivated layperson like myself. He's a business person. He's an entrepreneur. He's as smart as they come. He's as motivated as they come. And through his blog, he introduced the power of laity in the church. I have a lot of respect for the people at Stand Firm and Greg Griffith, and I think they've done a lot in helping people know what the argument is really about, what is really happening in the Episcopal Anglican Church today. In his letter, he said he's going to go back to Rome with his family, and or because he was married as a Catholic, and that he still expects to be able to have a voice in what's going on here in the Episcopal Church. I know the other bloggers at Stand Firm, have a lot of difficulty with this, and George and I just want to discuss this as a whole, not picking on Greg, not picking on the Roman Catholic Church, but to discuss the issue of standing firm, having a voice from within or without, and using other examples of where this did not work in the past. Let's start with where this did not work in the past, George.
Well, I used to take a magazine called the New Oxford Review back in the 90s. I think it was in the early 90s. I was still in seminary at the time, and it was, if you will, a Stand Firm on paper. It was a very cutting-edge, traditionalist Episcopalian magazine that pointed out the foibles and errors of the Episcopal Church at that time. And one by one, its leading lights joined the Catholic Church. But they still talked about Anglicanism, but eventually, about 15 years ago, their relevance to the Anglican world disappeared entirely. Now, for those of you who've heard of the New Oxford Review, I think almost everybody, well, not everybody, but I assume most people would think of it purely in Roman Catholic terms. It's a traditionalist Catholic periodical,
Wasn't that
which
way?
it is.
It wasn't that way.
It wasn't that way once. And the reason why the New Oxford Review dropped the Anglicanism bit is because once its editors became Catholic and moved out of the reaction phrase of I'm against the Episcopal Church and for the Catholic Church, they began to focus their energies on the Catholic Church, their new home. And they had no more time or interest in the Episcopal world. Stand Firm, as an institution, I think has taken one below the waterline. If its editor and if its publisher has essentially said, I am no longer going to stand firm, and I've quit, but I'm still going to complain about the Episcopal Church or the Anglican world, I don't think many people would take it seriously.
No.
And that does a disservice to its other bloggers and its other contributors whose voices now are being, overshadowed by the editorial direction at the top.
However, if Greg Griffith decided to do the same type of thing for the Catholic Church, to hold its leaders accountable, I think he would be very good at it. As a lay leader and as a person who knows the power of laity, I think if that's where he wants to put his focus and concentrate on the Catholic Church, that would be great. But it's hard to volley back once you left. I can't move to Canada and complain about America and expect the Americans to listen to me. It's just not the way that our culture understands complaints. Now, I think we all know this, maybe not. This may offend all of you or none of you. There is no perfect church out there yet. That's coming.
Now, Kevin, the Episcopal Church of the Redeemer in Avon Park comes very close.
And so is New Hope Anglican in Thomaston, Connecticut. But other than those two churches, there are no perfect churches, no perfect denominations out there. When Jesus comes again, that's when we all come together as one. Until that point in time, it's kind of church hopping if you're just looking for a better place to worship and not be offended by what's going on. And you lose your voice when you do that. I don't know what the future is for Stand Firm. I know that Matt Kennedy and Sarah and all the other people there certainly are capable of and good writers, and I hope it still goes on. It's needed by our church to have a blog like that. But we're also coming to the age where people are reading blogs and news less, George, and we've alluded to this before, that people won't go beyond the first or second sentences of a lot of the stories you and I put out. It's, they're moving to audio and video and Twitter and other sources for their information, and maybe Greg's seeing the future of that as well.
To interrupt, but I think one thing that I do need to say is that it's the whole topic of conversion or leaving a church and joining another one. Because people bring this up to me all the time. Why are you still an Episcopal priest? Well, because I believe in the doctrines and teachings of the Book of Common Prayer. And just because there's some nuts and fruitcakes at the top of the tree doesn't mean that my faith is impinged in any way. I hope to be able to persevere and help lead the church back into a right relationship with God and people. If you're leaving a church because you're angry with it, that's great. But don't say I'm joining a new church and list all the reasons why your old church was rotten as reasons for joining the new church. The Anglicans and Catholics have some very, very close similarities. But just like chimps and human beings have 98% of their DNA in common, it's that 2%
makes all the difference.
That's question. The Immaculate Conception, the Assumption of Mary, papal infallibility, the sacrifice of the Mass. These are things that differentiate Anglicans from Roman Catholics. And if you quit the Anglican world because you're mad at gay bishops and gay blessings and goofy political statements and sloppy liturgy and corrupting youth ministry, all good reasons for stopping to go to a particular church, but you don't accept any of these dogmatic statements of the Catholic Church, you're just setting yourself up for a problem.
Sure. However, as fellow reporters, we do wish Greg well. We wish Stan Firm well, and we just want to bring our audience up to date on what's happening here in America, and keep everybody in your prayers. Via the magic of Skype, a wonderful application on everybody's desktop, I get to talk to my good friend from Canterbury, Peter Old. Now, Peter has a twin brother who you've seen on the program named David Old. They often discuss who mother loved best, and that's still an ongoing argument. Peter, welcome to episode 100 of Anglican Unscripted.
Hello, let's celebrate, shall we?
Yes. Whee!
Anglican Unscripted 100 brought to you in glorious 3D.
3D. Ow. Oh, you got me. All right. So we want to go on with some of the news now. A lot of our audiences...
Are we having fun yet?
I have fun every day, Peter, that I get to talk to some follically challenged person in Canterbury. It's me having fun. So let's be honest, 90% of the audience did not know anything about Jersey, where it was located other than New Jersey here. And to hear about Jersey Shore, they were waiting for some Kim Kardashian news. We have news that deals with bishops. And we're going to give a quick update. Last week we talked pretty extensively about the Jersey Shore. What's this week's update?
Yeah, so the update this week is that it emerges that 2 complaints have been lodged against Tim Dakin, the Bishop of Winchester, complaints under the clergy discipline measure of the Church of England. I've been trying to find out a little bit about them. My understanding is that one of the complaints, let's call it the less serious but still serious complaint, basically says that the bishop has basically brought the church into disrepute by his actions, and has I believe the word traduced, for those posh English legal words, has traduced some people on the island.
Can I make the obvious conclusion here that if a bishop can make the church of ill repute, that the bishop can be brought under charges, and we've kind of missed about 600 years of doing that for some bishops? And you froze again? You froze again. Well, we are having trouble.
Oh, this is going well, isn't it?
Oh, well, for the 100th episode, obviously we're still dealing with Skype. I was just asking the question, can we assume that if a bishop brings ill repute to the church, he can be disciplined?
I don't know, ask the lawyers. Ask the Ecclesiastical Tribunal. Ask the Archbishop of York, who's now dealing with these.
Because
So
for the last 600 years, it's not been used very much.
It hasn't been used. Well, this is a very new legal measure.
Okay.
Before that, we had the ecclesiastical courts, which was just painful to endure. So the first complaint basically says that the bishop has brought the church into disrepute and has been telling porkies about people on the island. Let's see where that goes. The second complaint is a more serious one. I understand that it's coming from somebody very, very senior in the legal scene in Jersey, and it basically lists a number of reasons why the Bishop of Winchester has broken Jersey canon law and English canon law in his actions in the last year or so. Now that's a really serious charge. That's not just saying, look, he said bad things about people, blah, blah. That's saying he broke the law. And also, there is, I understand, an allegation that he tried to get someone else to break the law. And those are serious charges. They're going up now to the Archbishop of York, because Winchester is in Canterbury province. Then the Archbishop of Canterbury obviously has kind of said, look, I can't do it because I have direct line management, so it needs to go off to the Archbishop of York. So the timescales would be we'd need to wait about a month to hear what will happen next.
It's interesting because, let's be honest, when Peter says he's heard something, it generally means he's talked to the person who's making that news. And Peter has the inside sources of inside sources who know the inside sources, but he won't divulge.
Well,
but he won't divulge because he's an honorary priest in Canterbury. Who those sources are?
I'm a priest, certainly. Sometimes I talk to the people. Sometimes I talk to people who talk to people. Sometimes you talk to a few people around the fringes, and when this person on this side is saying the same thing as this person on this side, then you kind of put things together. But it's sort of become a very serious moment. We're 2 weeks now from Tim Dakin having the Steele report. Remember, he said he'd try and get it to Jersey as quickly as he could once he's just sorted out these few little issues. Well, he's had 2 working weeks, and we've had nothing.
They're working out where to put the commas and stuff like that. There's probably some grammatical errors.
I think the dynamic was very much with the Bishop of Winchester, who seemed to think he could just ride this out.
Yeah.
And now I think it's beginning to be, from the other side. I think the Jersey mob, Jersey Shore, beginning to get their dynamic in. Had somebody comment on my blog about this a few days ago, saying, "Oh, it's just I wonder if they're all Freemasons getting together." Well, my understanding is the two people who've laid the complaints aren't Freemasons, wouldn't even want to be Freemasons, and are certainly not incredibly high in the Jersey hierarchy in that sense. But one of them is an important lawyer, and so things are looking very interesting. Well, it's not. I mean, to be honest, people lay complaints under the clergy discipline measure against bishops all the time, right?
Sure.
So the bishop didn't answer my letter, charge him, right?
Yes.
The bishop didn't do what I wanted him to do, charge him, and these things just they get dismissed. My suspicion is that these complaints are of substance. They can't just be sort of dismissed. They will have to be dealt with properly.
Okay. The world knows, because the world only listens to what the Telegraph and other people tell them, that the Church of England now has women bishops. But Peter's here to tell us that's not the real news. Peter, we know that each diocese in the Church of England has voted in favor of having women bishops by a majority of people who voted in their polls.
Yeah, so all the dioceses have now voted. They've all voted yes. Even some of them that kind of voted around the no area last time, they've all voted yes on these current proposals. So off it goes to General Synod in July, and we see what happens. People are saying, well, if the dioceses have voted unanimously and with larger majorities, then it should all go through. But remember, General Synod is not diocesan synods. The same people are voting this time round that voted back in November 2012 when it all went pear-shaped. And while some people who voted no last time might now vote yes, there's a possibility that some people who voted yes might now vote no instead. And really, I don't think anybody knows how it will go until the final vote happens.
Well, it is surprising that places like Forward and Faith and others have signed off on the current legislation before them, or the current proposal.
Well, it's been done well this time, because last time they said, there will be a code of conduct, but we won't write that until the legislation passed. And there'll be this and that, but we won't write it. And a lot of people went, that's no good, we can't work with that. So this time what they did, they literally got everybody into a room and hit their heads together and said, right, work something out that will work for all of you. So they did. And all the codes of conduct are sorted out and all that kind of stuff. So what is being voted on is what they will have. But it doesn't guarantee a solution. It really doesn't. And you know what? I want to suggest that if we don't pass it this time, we need to let it lie for 5 years or something. Yeah, we just need to put it down and just have a stop and have a think about how we're going to do this.
Yeah, that's a good advice.
Yeah,
Peter,
the worst thing, if we just say, sure. The worst thing would be just to bring it straight back with the new General Synod when it's voted in 2015 or so. That would actually be a bad move, I think. It would almost be sort of unfair process. If this General Synod has voted it down twice, I think everybody needs to go away because there are lots of us who are conservative on the issue but recognise that it's going to happen, so want to have it to happen. Yeah, so let's just do it and get it done well, right?
That's one part of it. Yes.
We need to. If we vote no again, we need to give some significant space between this vote and another vote, and we need to basically think about what went wrong, or went right for some people,
sure.
and get it sorted out.
Peter, happy 100th.
Yeah, do you want one of these? Here we go.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Peter.
Let joy and celebration be unconfined.
Yes, and another celebration when we get to 200. We may go 150. Who knows? But thank you so much for your time and devotion to Anglican Unscripted the last 3 years, and we shall catch you next week.
God bless.
George, let's move on to our next story. I want to talk about advertising in the church. There's a recent post on Facebook that you made that's getting lots of comments, and I thought we could talk about it on Anglican Unscripted. You saw an ad. What did the ad say?
Well, I was looking at this blog called the Quinton Report, and the blogger is a Roman Catholic, and he came across this ad in an alternative newspaper in Charleston. And the ad has on one side a statue of Mary, Queen of Heaven, looking all pious with her hands together. Wow. And on the other side of the ad, a Bloody Mary with a straw and a piece of celery. And in between are the words, the Virgin Mary, followed by Bloody Marys. And then it gives you how to find the Church of the Holy Communion if you're coming from any one of a number of restaurants in downtown Charleston. Now, the headline on this blog post on the Quinton Report is this church ad over the line or just tacky?
All right.
And, man, I've got an opinion to share with you.
Well, sure. I mean, this comes off as the most uninformed ad in the history of Catholic-Protestant relationships. Let's find out about Bloody Mary. I think Bloody Mary was named after Mary I, daughter of Henry VIII, of England. She did what, George, that she's famous for?
She burnt all the Protestants. We have the Martyrs Memorial in Oxford, where Ridley and Latimer were all burned, I think it was. And you can still go there to this day and see the scorch marks and the stones. And she led the Catholic reaction against Henry VIII, against Edward VI.
That's right. Yep.
Excuse me. Protestant reforms. And Bloody Mary earned her name by killing of Christian Protestants.
So it's something we should celebrate, apparently. So we're getting some comments. What are the comments on Facebook?
Well, we've got two sorts of comments. One, this is evil. This is sacrilegious. This is totally against good taste and good Catholic doctrine and order. And then we've got other people saying, come on, lighten up. This is just an alternative magazine trying to get hipsters to come to church by being rather edgy.
Edgy or bloody.
Edgy.
I think it's one of the most ill-informed ads I've ever read, and I've seen a lot. I used to be in the industry. I don't know what to do about stuff like this, George. It's news. It's bad news. I can't believe this is an ACNA church.
It's not.
Oh.
It's a church of the Episcopal Church in South Carolina. Church of the Whole Communion stayed with the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
But, Kevin, it's not just a question of aesthetics. In other words, if it's just, I like it, you don't, let's leave it at that. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, we need to sort of explore things a little bit deeper. Anglo-Catholicism has a reputation, for better, for worse, for being...
Careful.
Okay, let me just back up a tiny little bit. I have worshipped and served at Anglo-Catholic congregations. Uh-huh. I even attended Pusey House in Oxford, the citadel of Anglo-Catholicism. And there is a creepy factor in Anglo-Catholicism, sort of a gin and lace and slightly fey, slightly camp, women ordinands. During my time at St. Stephen's, the Anglo-Catholic seminary in Oxford, called each other by women's names. Not a very wholesome place, okay? Playing into that slightly fey, slightly vulgar, slightly camp attitude is just going to reinforce the prejudice of every South Carolinian who's a Baptist, who looks at the Episcopal Church as being suspect, morally, socially, theologically. And if you are putting out an ad that plays into all the prejudices that people have against Anglo-Catholicism, it may be inside humor that appeals to you and your fellow people who like the ad, but it is so offensive to the body of Christ. Because what has this got to do with anything other than creating a little ghetto for like-minded, creepy people?
George, let's close out episode 100 of Anglican Unscripted. We need to remind you we're still raising money for our trip to Thy Kingdom Come conference. I will be recording and posting videos and maybe live streaming. We need the money to get there. We're up to about 600. We need another 400. Please go to Anglican.tv/donate or click this link at the bottom of the video. It'd be a lot of fun when we get there. They're going to pick a new Archbishop of the ACNA. The second Archbishop of the 39th province. That's going to be an exciting time. Now, last time, George and I, when they were picking a new Archbishop of Canterbury, went through the list of favorites. Because there's a conclave and this is done a lot differently, there's no way we could really go through the list of the 50 favorite. So we're going to do things a little differently and play it by the book and not try and guess who's going to be the next Archbishop here in the ACNA. George, how was your week?
Pretty good.
Uh-huh.
Pretty good.
That's good.
It's always wonderful to be able to worship the Lord and serve Him as a priest, and, it's fun.
Yeah, sure. You get to do, and you get paid to do it. That's not fair.
Not too much.
Not too much. Puts gas in the tank. Had a great time here. The sun has finally come out in Connecticut. We've suffered a horrible spring. Basically, we've had winter up until May 27th. I know you don't suffer that down in June. Do you still have the AC on today, George?
Oh, yes. It's in the 90s, and not a cloud in the sky. It's hot. It's starting to get humid. It's Florida summer.
Good to hear. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And you've been watching episode 100 of Anglican Unscripted.